Did you know that there exists an ancient book that contains a secret that had been hidden for over 4,000 years? Did you know that this secret was only revealed during this past year? Did you know that it required the technology of our day in order to discover what the secret was hiding? Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the planet Jupiter had collided with a rogue planet. What thoughts would be going through your mind? Would you think of how this would affect the Earth in the years to come? Or would you just glance over the information and continue with your day? The secret that was discovered describes just such an event. It reveals major celestial upheavals that will begin in September of 2017, starting with a collision between Jupiter and a rogue planet. And it provides a roadmap to the culmination of an extinction-level event that is set to occur on March 28 of 2021, when the Earth will encounter this debris field. The book describes a very unusual and unique celestial alignment that we now know through technology available to us has only occurred twice in the Earth's history, having approximately 6,000 years between these occurrences. The first instance is seen in the heavens on August 5th, 3915 BC, and the next occurrence is currently in the making, and concludes on September 23rd of 2017, a date that every person will clearly remember one way or another. The celestial alignments involve the constellation Virgo, which is in labor for 9 months, being pregnant with the planet Jupiter. She is clothed with the sun, has the moon at her feet, and wears a crown of 12 stars on her head. These two alignments are linked to a prophecy and a vision in this ancient book that describes major celestial events to us, telling us both what will happen and when to expect these events to occur. In both alignments, Jupiter is the focus of the action. The moon acts as a trigger or marker to indicate the relative position of Jupiter in the constellation Virgo when the prophesied events will transpire. 3 of the stars in the crown of Virgo's head are wandering stars or planets, and they convey a specific message that links the events described in the prophecy and the vision to their respective alignments. The first event in the sequence involves a cataclysmic collision with Jupiter as soon as it is birthed from Virgo's womb. In addition to this, the Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet, which impacted with Jupiter in July of 1994, was a sign given to us to mark the area on Jupiter that will be affected by this collision. If you think that this is just a hoax, wait for September and then keep an eye on Jupiter around September 9th, or shortly thereafter, to know that this ancient book was not written by a person who is bound to space and time, and contains the absolute truth. The second alignment marks an event that will occur 2 weeks later on September 23rd. After the first event occurs, you can have 100% certainty that the second event will also occur, as the first will be a sign given to the world to point to the more important event occurring on September 23rd. The events that will occur on this day will affect every person alive on Earth in a very profound way, and you want to be ready for this when it happens. To find out more about what will happen and how to be ready, please watch the videos in this channel, where more details are provided. Your life literally depends on it. You are welcome to download and share this information free of charge, and details are given in the description below. I hope that you will be prepared for what is coming.
The great sign in heaven of Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. Jesus calls such events fearful sights and great signs from heaven. The great sign from heaven will be the largest sign that has ever heralded a prophetic event. We are on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It is 3 a.m. on September 23, 2017. The first constellation in the great sign is rising above the horizon. This is Leo, the constellation of the royal lion. When the dawn breaks, we'll see that Leo is worn as a crown of royalty by the Virgin Princess. The lion forms the appropriate crown for her because she is of the house of David, the lion of the tribe of Judah. Significantly, this is the highest royal lineage of all the nations. This means the Virgin is also born of the lineage of the high scepter of the seed of Adam. In her belly is the second Adam, the Savior of the world. On this fateful day, the Virgin is clothed in the sun, and the moon is at her feet. Sunlight floods the sky, and since the Virgin is clothed in the sun, we cannot see her, so we turn off her artwork. But the prophecy clearly states that the great sign is to appear in the heaven. High noon approaches. Then, on this special day, the sun turns as black as sackcloth, and the stars quickly fill the sky. Just like on the day of the crucifixion, it will remain dark for an incredible 3 hours. We stop the motion and zoom in. We fill the screen with our 2 constellations. To better see how the constellations are formed, we generate blue lines between their stars. Then we turn off the constellation artwork, leaving us with the lines of each constellation. We first turn our attention to the constellation of Leo. In Leo, the alpha or brightest star is Regulus, the regal king star. 8 additional bright stars are used to form the constellation. But this leaves us 3 stars short of the 12 stars prophesied to crown the Virgin. On this special day, 3 wandering stars are in rare formation within the boundaries of Leo. They are Venus, Mars, and Mercury. This gives us the prophesied 12 stars to form the crown. Now we move to Virgo. Her left hip is formed by the alpha star named Spica, which means the seed. Her right hip is formed by the zeta star named Hes, which means the branch. On this day, the Virgin is to give birth to the king planet between these 2 stars. Like all the planets, Jupiter, which images the Messiah, was misnamed and misdescribed by the Greeks. The king planet images the rescuing power of our Messiah. Because of this planet's gravitational strength, it takes countless hits or impacts for us from many of the dangerous objects that cross into the inner solar system. Also, the king planet has just spent 9 months in the belly of the Virgin, reinforcing the prophetic imagery of the scriptures. To illustrate this wonder, we will now run the clock backward for a year. Notice that the king planet stops and turns around twice in retrograde motion while in the belly of the Virgin. In turn, the moon flies by along the ecliptic every month. This action by the moon will give us a means to mark the passing of the months. We stop our backward motion. We now change into forward motion. We pause the motion as Jupiter enters the belly of the Virgin. Now count the times that the moon flies by while Jupiter is in the Virgin's belly. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and in just under 10 months we arrive back at our fateful day, September 23rd, 2017. Now we will recap the prophetic imagery in the great sign. First, we have Virgo, the Virgin Princess, imaging the Virgin Mary. Second, the Virgin is clothed in the sun, imaging the life-giving Spirit of God. Third, the crescent moon is at her feet, heralding this day as the Jewish Feast of Trumpets. Fourth, on this day, the Virgin also has a special crown of 12 stars, representing the lineage of the high throne of the nation of Israel. Fifth, the Virgin gives birth to the crown prince, the Messiah. Sixth, the crown prince has just spent a long 9 months in her womb, the time of human gestation. Seventh, so we can see this wonder, a special heavenly event causes the sky to fall dark for 3 hours in the middle of the day. The combination of all 7 of these independent actions into a great sign brings to life the exact imagery of the prophecy. However, if this sign were to occur repeatedly in the course of the travels of the planets, then how could we interpret it as a significant event? How often does this configuration occur in the heavens? The answer, it occurs only this one time. At no other time is the Virgin clothed in the sun, with the moon at her feet, while she is wearing a crown of 12 stars at the same time she gives birth. We have found no astronomy program that shows this configuration occurring at any other time throughout history, from the days of Adam, 6,000 years in the past, until the end of the millennial reign, 1,000 years into our future. Yet this wonder was described in detail in Revelation chapter 12, nearly 2,000 years ago. The astounding fulfillment of this great prophecy is like a clarion blast of God's trumpet, broadcasting to all that the sign is a magnificent herald of end times events. Furthermore, its appearance is to occur on the exact day the Lord intends, a plan he laid out before he created the heavens. This means the great sign is an event that cannot be anything less than a miraculous herald of prophetic events. Furthermore, the imagery does not end with the first two verses we just read in Revelation 12. On this day, a famous comet carrying the Rosetta probe is beside the crescent moon. This comet bodes a day of disaster for the moon god of Islam. At noon, the foot of the Virgin is on one side of the moon, the comet is on the other. By the end of the day, the moon will be under the Virgin's feet. This day in 2017 is also unique for other reasons. As mentioned, this is the day of the Feast of Trumpets, one of the 7 appointed feasts of the Lord. The 7 feasts are prophetic of the 7 most significant events in redemptive history. Jesus was crucified on the first spring feast. This is the day of the first fall feast. In turn, this day on this unique year is also on the weekly 7th-day Sabbath. Finally, it is also the day of the fall equinox. Incredibly, all of these date markers in the heavens are occurring on the same day on the Lord's calendar. The day progresses. At 3 in the afternoon, the eclipse will be over. The sun reappears and shines for 3 more hours before it sets in the west. At this point, the great wonder becomes the herald of great terror. The heavenly body that blocked the sun for 3 hours is immense enough to carry large debris rings of ice and sulfur, rings composed of material much like the rings of Saturn, only larger. Soon the earth must pass through one of these rings. This is when the firestorm of the Golden Empire occurs. It is the day of the death of Babylon the Great, which is the proud city of Sodom, which is the unrepentant empire. In 1 hour's time, 1/3 of mankind will die. Foreseeing the intensity of the hour, the Lord has foretold time and again that not one person who calls upon his name will be lost. The shouting and terror begins. Jerusalem will be safe from the firestorm because of the earth's rotation. In contrast, unmitigated disaster falls upon the Western world. And the Lord will cause his voice of authority to be heard, and the striking of his arm will be seen in the indignation of his fierce anger, in a flame of consuming fire, in driving rain, a torrent, and hailstones. When he opened the 6th seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair. The whole moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig sheds its unripe fruit when shaken by a storm. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or have you seen the armory of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of tribulation, for the day of war and battle? With pestilence and with blood I will enter into judgment with Gog, and I will rain on him and on his troops, and on the many peoples who are with him a torrential rain, with hailstones, fire, and brimstone. Apocalyptic scripture reveals catastrophic events. These catastrophic events are designed by God to facilitate important changes he is making in his administration of both heaven and earth. These changes include momentous governmental transformation that carries us from one age to another, from one dispensation to another. Very soon you are going to experience this incredibly intense journey. Apocalyptic events are so extreme they will have deep emotional effects, shaking all mankind to the core. One of God's great purposes for apocalyptic scripture is to shake us into realizing that our situation is serious, and that we must take action before these events arrive in order to guard our souls and the souls of all those we love. Dawn in the shadow of Congress. It is the day of the great sign. Forerunners of the firestorm of the Golden Empire streak the sky. The end is within hours. The great sign in heaven heralds the world's entrance into end times troubles. God's grace is manifested in this sign. It has been created to warn us, flee from the wrath to come. The day of the anger of the Lamb is approaching, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? The only way for you to flee is to flee to the Lord. The wise men had the eyes to see that the star of Bethlehem meant a prophetic day was upon them. They then acted on what they saw. Do you have the eyes to see that the great sign from heaven means a prophetic day is upon you? The most famous star of history was a herald of good news. In contrast, God is going to use the largest sign in history to herald terrifying news. The first herald called forth shouts of great joy. This second herald will call forth shouts of great terror. The great sign is so significant, there are at least 3 forerunner signs preparing the way for its appearance. The blood moon tetrad, the famous comet carrying the Rosetta probe, and the great American eclipse of 2017. Midway between the blood moons of 2014, the Caliphate of Islam was reborn. This event constitutes the birth of the little horn, the 8th prophetic king described in Revelation chapter 17. It will become the empire of the beast. The great comet carrying the Rosetta probe passed into the constellations of the great sign on the very day of the 4th blood moon, stitching together end times signs. It will remain in the great sign for 2 years and be beside the moon when the great sign appears, boding disaster for Allah and his new caliphate. The great American eclipse of August 21st, 2017. This solar eclipse sweeps around half the earth but brings darkness to only one land, the United States of America. This is the final heads-up call to awaken. Cataclysmic judgment is only 33 days away. The great American firestorm will arrive 33 days after the great American eclipse of 2017. God's purpose of fearful sights and great signs from heaven is to bring many people who would not have done so otherwise to call upon the name of the Lord. For the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. God has designed special configurations among the stars to function as signs. They are signs that herald prophetic events on the earth. This heralding will serve notice before the eyes of the world that the time of events foretold by the Lord has arrived. All this means the great sign in heaven has full authority to function as a public event, legally documenting the final great warning of God. The Lord is the great prophet. As a prophet, he is accountable to warn all who are under his ministry. The great wonder in heaven is his imminent and astounding warning to all. The time of judgment is here. This judgment is written in the book. This judgment is written in the stars. The prophets have warned you. This judgment is just. This means the Lord cannot be charged with any wrong against man or angel for the judgment he is bringing upon the world. You are served notice. The Lord's end times events are about to overtake you. The great sign in heaven is the colossal herald proclaiming that the prophetic troubles of the last days have arrived. Most of us refuse to believe God's work by faith, while we will believe his working through a sign. So God is going to give us a sign, a great sign. This great sign will herald sudden and great judgment. But why? The rebel lawmakers of the Golden Empire have foolishly attacked Christian purity. The attack on purity is because the lawmakers will not have holiness to rule over them. But to reject God's holiness is to reject God himself. In the end, the rebels' own reasoning forces them to declare war on God. As soon as the rebels feel bold enough, open war breaks out. In defiance, they reach out and seize their own court officers that are still walking in holiness. At this point, the spirit of Sodom overtakes the land. The Lord acts swiftly. The judgment of Sodom will be poured out on the spirit of Sodom. The Lord begins moving into place his storehouse for the day of battle. Like little David, all he needs is some rocks. The day of battle arrives. It is a day of fearful sights and great signs from heaven. The Lord takes aim, and the golden Goliath suddenly falls. The empire will die in 1 hour, unrepentant in its wickedness. The unrepentant empire and the church in the unrepentant empire have together refused to confess the empire's fatal sin. What is this fatal sin that brings such sudden judgment? Our fatal sin is the replacement of holiness with human rights as our guiding moral principle in life and government. This is in direct opposition to the Lord's decree, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." The manifest insanity of pornographic rights, abortion rights, and homosexual rights is the diseased fruit of the doctrine of human rights. This is why evil has become good, and good has become evil in our land. The unrepentant adherence to the doctrine of human rights that is producing the trampling of the holiness of God in our courts is the guarantee of the firestorm of the Golden Empire. Your only hope will be to turn to the Lord Jesus Christ. For Jesus himself said, "As earnestly as I can say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." In the same conversation with Nicodemus, Jesus also said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." Call on his name with all your heart. Please do not risk one day's wait. Everyone, pray out loud with me, even if you're already born again. Decide now and say this prayer. Jesus, I cry out to you. I admit I am a sinner, fallen and under your judgment. In confusion, I've replaced your holiness with man's counterfeit. I want to be born again and to see rightly. Rescue me from your firestorm and send your Holy Spirit to dwell in me. Amen. Now try out your spiritual eyes. Find a Bible and read the Gospel of John. It is the 4th book in the New Testament.
It can't be denied that there is real interest surrounding the existence of Nibiru. For hundreds of years, the search has been on to rediscover this hidden planet. But why are we searching for something that we have never seen, and how do we even know it exists? You may be surprised to learn that even though we have not discovered this planet in modern times, it is almost impossible for it not to exist, and we are going to tell you why. There is ancient and even modern evidence that can't be accounted for but anything else than the existence of another planet. Due to the large number of natural disasters that have happened on our planet, many people claim that it is due to the approach of Nibiru. Now, for those of you who see it as the destroyer of the Earth, we're not going to give you any false evidence that it is sitting behind the sun and approach is imminent. That is simply not the case. In fact, the planet is so far away at the moment that it may even orbit another sun in a figure-8 type orbit. This would explain a highly irregular orbit period and could even blow open the doors to once again rewrite what we have been led to believe about our position in the solar system. I mean, it could even be 20,000 years from now before it becomes visible through a high-powered space telescope. Does that not just blow your mind apart? Anyway guys, there are 6 credible pieces of evidence that could prove Nibiru exists. Now listen, we are not saying it definitely exists, but we are saying that there is something out there in the perimeter of our solar system that when discovered, it will not only confirm our wildest suspicion, but answer the questions of which we are already coming up with answers to. Just wait until you hear this. At number 6, irregularities in Neptune and Uranus' orbit. Following the discovery of the planet Neptune in 1846, there has been considerable speculation that another planet exists beyond its orbit, a region we call the Trans-Neptunian region. The search was underway in the mid-19th century and culminated at the start of the 20th with Percival Lowell's quest for Planet X. Lowell proposed the Planet X hypothesis to explain apparent discrepancies in the orbits of the giant planets, particularly Uranus and Neptune, speculating that the gravity of a large unseen ninth planet could have perturbed Uranus enough to account for the irregularities. Clyde Tombaugh's discovery of Pluto in 1930 appeared to validate Lau's hypothesis, and Pluto was officially named the 9th planet. But in 1978, Pluto was conclusively determined to be too small for its gravity to affect the giant planets, resulting in a brief search for a 10th planet. The search was largely abandoned in the early 1990s. But in 2014, based on similarities of the orbits of a group of recently discovered extreme trans-Neptunian planets, astronomers hypothesized the existence of a super-Earth planet, 15 times the mass of the Earth and beyond 200 astronomical units, with the possibility of a high inclined orbit at some 1500 astronomical units. 1 astronomical unit being the distance between the Earth and the Sun. In 2016, further work showed that this unknown distant planet is likely on an inclined, highly eccentric orbit. There is clear evidence out there, but because the planet is so far away, constant observations are close to impossible. And at number 5, Sumerian text and depictions. How could a civilization dating back 5,000 years have had more advanced knowledge of astronomy than we have today? That is a question we have long lost the answers to, but the ancient Sumerians depicted and documented the first Nibiru some 3,500 years before the birth of Christ. There are even descriptions of beings that came down from this planet of the crossing to mine Earth for gold in order to save the atmosphere of Nibiru on its closest approach to the sun. These beings are known to the ancients as the Anunnaki, and they were worshipped on Earth as gods. Although the Sumerian astronomical texts are incredibly difficult to decipher, it has been done. One thing that is there for all to see and easily understood is of course the very famous depictions of Nibiru. This can't be denied, but incredibly we are yet to fully understand astronomy as the ancient Sumerians did all those thousands of years ago. Maybe we are overcomplicating our understanding of the sky, maybe we're looking too hard and too far that we are missing the obvious answers to the deepest questions. At number 4 on our list, Carlos Munoz Ferrada. His name is forever linked to Nibiru. Carlos Munoz Ferrada predicted with extraordinary accuracy numerous earthquakes in South America during the last century. He did this by making direct correlations between specific astronomical phenomena and various catastrophic earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. His most significant prediction regards the future arrival of a comet planet Nibiru. Ferrada calls it a comet planet because it has the size of the planet and the speed and elliptical orbit of a comet. He explains that this is due to the catastrophic approach of the comet planet, which will eventually pass 14 million kilometers away from Earth, accelerating the great geophysical change, which is already slowing advancing. The Chilean astronomer specified the mass, velocity, orbital time, the trajectory, and the terrible consequences being produced by Nibiru on our solar system. He recognized Munoz Ferrada for his mathematical accuracy in regards to the earthquake that devastated the southernmost country in South America in 1939. The accuracy was to such an extent that Ferrada even set the date of the earthquake, which was published in the Journal of Conception. He was only wrong by a difference of 2 hours. The disaster claimed the lives of 60,000 people. He also announced the earthquakes of 1960 and 1985. There will come a time when Nibiru will be permanently visible as the second sun and in common conditions in broad daylight. This is why it was rediscovered in the 80s by the Orbiting Infrared Telescope, IRAS. Carlos did not mention when this planet would come close to the Earth, only that world events would intensify as the years go by. The closer the planet gets, the more cataclysmic the events. We still cannot see the planet, so as we said at the start of the video, we are looking at a time frame of over 20,000 years at least before the events get to any significant intensity. So don't worry guys. We may already have colonized the galaxy and invented light speed by that point. At number 3, cataclysms on Earth. At intervals throughout Earth's history, there has been world cataclysms or extinction level events. From giants to dinosaurs and even 20-foot insects, the Earth has been under occupation for millions of years. And just like all other species that have become extinct, we will also come to an end at some point in Earth's history. The most recent cataclysm that we know of came 12,000 years ago, but unfortunately have no idea why it happened. We showed you in our previous selection that the Sumerian astronomers depicted the planet Nibiru on its way out of its highly elliptical orbit. So this could actually be the cause of the ancient event of 12,000 years ago, and the Sumerians were still able to view this planet on its way back to the outer solar system. It would explain how the Sumerians had the advanced knowledge possibly gifted from the Anunnaki of Nibiru as they mined the Earth for gold. Now we're completely aware of how crazy and wild of an idea this sounds, but let's just keep it open. And at number 2, the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is a strange place, Located between planets Mars and Jupiter, it is thought by many that the asteroid belt was in fact once a planet that collided with the Nibiru system. Beginning in 1801, tiny rock and metallic objects were discovered to be orbiting the Sun at about this distance. Since then, several 100,000 large asteroids have been catalogued, and it is estimated there are more than 1 million large asteroids. Among catastrophists, there is substantial disagreement on the matter of this missing fifth planet from the Sun, in the place of which lies the Great Band, the debris of an enormous planet which the Sumerians knew as Tiamat. Ancient Sumerian texts indicate that Tiamat was struck by a large planet, which moved into its present orbit, and also created the Earth's moon and the asteroid belt. In his books, The 12th Planet in the Cosmic Code, Zechariah Sitchin outlines the celestial battle, as described in the Babylonian text Enuma Elish. The planet Nibiru, as it came into the solar system on its clockwise retrograde elliptical course, struck Tiamat, which was moving in its ordained counterclockwise orbit. According to Sitchin's well-known translations, one of Nibiru's satellites struck Tiamat first, followed by 2 more of its moons. Nibiru then itself, an enormous cosmic entity, struck Tiamat, smashing one half of the planet into pieces, which became what the Sumerians called the Great Band. The remaining half of the planet, which was struck by a smaller moon of Nibiru, was catapulted into a new orbit, along with a chunk of material which became its moon. According to the Enuma Elish, Tiamat's original moons were dispersed, many changing the direction of their orbits and rotations, creating Earth's moon and the asteroid belt. There is indeed evidence of this great cataclysm in our solar system today. And finally, number 1 on our list, Planet 9, speck of light observed. In January of 2016, researchers at Caltech stunned the world by announcing the discovery of the Planet 9. A speck of light was observed, and astronomers and stargazers around the world are waiting in anticipation for more confirmation. Though the NASA researchers are stressing that this is only a speck of light that has been observed, they can confirm that they are on the verge of discovering the planet. So basically, the 200-year search for Nibiru is going to happen within 20 years. The object, which the researchers have nicknamed Planet 9, could have a mass of about 10 times that of Earth and orbit about 20 times farther than the Sun on average than Neptune. It may take 20,000 Earth years to make one full orbit around the Sun. Have noticed some of the dwarf planets and other small icy objects tend to follow orbits that cluster together. By analyzing these orbits, the Caltech team predicted the possibility that a large, previously undiscovered planet may be hiding far beyond Pluto. They estimate the gravity of this potential planet may explain the unusual orbits of those Kuiper belt objects. So there you have it. What do you think of our selections here? We hope you have enjoyed the evidence we have chosen to present to you. We are fully aware of the false information surrounding this planet, and the people who post the lies are doing a serious discredit to the people who are actively and historically dedicating their lives in the search for the planet Nibiru. Small shockwaves can make a huge difference, so please share our videos. My name's Seth from the Vertex Films YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, the ways by which we arrive at knowledge are hardly less wonderful than the discovery of these things themselves.
Wise men said, just walk this way to the dawn of the light. The wind will blow into your face as the years pass you by.
We all call it Planet X or Nibiru, but it is a dwarf star. It's either a red dwarf or brown dwarf star. Now, the object, which is clearly Planet X by deductive logic and process elimination, is therefore now between Mars and Jupiter. It's not in the outer reaches of the solar system. It can clearly be seen, especially from the southern hemisphere.
The implications and the side effects of what might happen to us here on Earth is pretty scary. We're going to get into some of that. Now, one of the cool things that David discusses with us here is instead of having to just take his word for it, he gives you coordinates on where you can actually see it for yourself. Mid-2017, he says we're going to see an eclipse with Nibiru. He has been able to take his background and transition it into research on Planet X, and has recently compiled an awesome book with a treasure trove of information. David, how the heck are you?
Very good tonight, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate you coming on here with us. I know that you had reached out to us a few weeks ago. You've got a really cool book coming up here that's going to break everything down with Nibiru. You know, let's talk about what you do.
Well, the way I got into it, I've always believed in following the money. About 5 years ago, I got into some research on the Pentagon black budget. And I don't know if you recall, but you probably do, that the day before 9/11, Don Rumsfeld announced at a Pentagon news conference that the agency was 2.2 trillion short. Money was simply missing, 2.2, not billion, but trillion. So having worked for a period of time at the Pentagon, I realized this was most likely black budget funds. And I did some investigation, and I ran across a couple of areas, basically the deep underground military base research done by Jesse Ventura, done by Phil Schneider, done by other personalities. And I realized, of course, that's likely the source of the lost money. It's black budget ops, and it's being spent. And why is it being spent in terms of these type of bases? So that's how my curiosity was picked, you might say. These bases, I understand, are built away primarily from geologic tectonic areas, but again, when Planet X passes, you're going to have new geotectonic faults established when you have force 11, 12, 13, 14 earthquakes. So I don't know how safe they're going to be. It could be a lost investment for those people. In any case, that was my basic introduction about 5 years ago, and then I got into the science of the topic. My understanding, and this is partly from Phil Schneider, I know he worked 11 years at Groom Lake, Area 51. He says the black budget varies between 0.2 trillion and 1.2 trillion per year. I'm not sure when the inception started. It was absolutely going on in the late 70s and 80s. He says a couple of dozen of these may be reasonable for protection. I agree, nuclear protection. But the question is, why do we have over 130 of these? That doesn't really make any sense unless, obviously, Planet X is absolutely a fact, which it is.
Well, so, you know, 4 years ago, I remember reading an article on Yahoo News that claimed eventually people are going to be able to look up in the sky and they're going to see what looks like a second sun, but really it's a giant sun that exploded. I think they said it was Betelgeuse or something like that. So in my mind, when I read stuff like that in the news, I think it's, you know, the forces behind the scenes or whoever's kind of orchestrating the media prepping people, you know, subconsciously getting them ready for this type of event. First, it's just an explosion that looks like a sun, and then, hey, oh, it is a sun. So, I mean, do you have any physical evidence, like pictures that you can say without a shadow of a doubt, or files or white papers?
Yes, I do. In fact, there's some very good videos on the internet itself that are good photographic analysis. There's one called Multiple Suns Rise Over Halifax, Nova Scotia. Those are the keywords that a person would enter on YouTube to read it or view it. And you can see the sun. And then at the 3 o'clock position, you have Planet X. To the right of Planet X, you have a separate lens flare. Now, that doesn't reflect the lens flare, of course, in the water below, but Planet X is generating its own light, and you can see its reflection, therefore, in the water below. Next, I think a fog bank moves in, and it obscures the sun, but Planet X is still visible. A lens flare cannot do this. Now, that's one good example of something they could simply look up themselves on YouTube. There's also some good Davis Station South Pole videos out there. And there's, in my book, which is Planet X, The Arrival in 2017 by David Mead on Amazon, I've done a video. It's on page 15 or 16 or so of the book. And I have a section called Photographic Analysis of Planet X. And I study one video which another analyst did an extensive study on. And let me just sort of explain what happened. A fellow named Glenn Vaughn on April 11th, 2015, was flying down the Pacific side of Central America. He's a professor, an ex-professor at California University. He took a 20 megapixel raw file with a Sony digital camera, and he confirmed the report by sending it in to a particular analyst for review. He took it through an aircraft window. Now, an analysis of the metadata indicated it was taken at 240 dpi, very high resolution, and the metadata further showed the date, the time, the GPS coordinates. I think it was a Sony DSC-HX50V camera. In any case, using Starry Night Professional version, the video, which is referenced in my book and which is on YouTube, did a field of view analysis, and he determined Mercury is above, in other words, superior conjunction with the Sun, and the object in the field of view, therefore, is not Mercury. Mercury does not have wings, as does this object, and Mercury does not have the brightness or contrast of the unknown object. Now, the analyst also performed a gamma test on a paint program. Gamma testing shows if an object is hot or cold. Hot objects generate, of course, their own light like our Sun. A lens flare would be a cold object. They read direct light, they don't generate it. So he started with a gamma of 1, reducing it by steps. At point 10, the gamma illustrates stark differences. At point 01, he shows the hottest, brightest objects on the video. He then reduced brightness to a value, I think, of -3 in contrast to +2. The hot objects fade in together, proving they're genuine. Then he ran a luminance test to determine the intensity of the object, and he determined it was behind the Sun, not a reflection. There are actually wings on the object, which is clearly behind the Sun. Now, he stated this is deeply disturbing. The reason is that gas tails of comets follow solar winds, and they're not visible until the comet's orbit is inside of Jupiter, at which point, normally the luminosity at that point of the Sun makes the tails of the comet or the planet visible. Of course, Planet X, we all call it Planet X or Nibiru, but it is a dwarf star. It's either a red dwarf or a brown dwarf star. Now, the object, which is clearly Planet X by deductive logic process elimination, is therefore now between Mars and Jupiter. It's not in the outer reaches of the solar system. It can clearly be seen, especially from the southern hemisphere. Now, as of April 2015, therefore, the date of that video and the analysis, Nibiru is close enough to the Sun so that the Sun's light is reflected to the tail, making it appearing like wings. And there's one other quick comment I'd make, because actually that video had 2 parts. The second part was a lady who lives near where I do, Sanibel Island, Florida, Melissa Huffman. Now, you can look at this video itself on YouTube. I think it has more or less gone viral, and nearly 1 million people have looked at it. And this is a 2015 video. The object is very interesting. She pans the sky and shows the object and then the moon. Now, it's clearly a planet visible just north of the Sun. Using stellarium and knowing the moon phases, comparing it to her video on the moon, you can go to the derived date, take away the atmosphere and the ocean, and you can determine the relationship of the stars to the horizon. So to determine the date, you basically just use moon charts, and the moon is well below the horizon in all dates after September 26, 2015. Therefore, the video was taken earlier. Now, September 2015 moon phases give us a comparable to the moon in the video. And if you look at the moon phases diagram to the actual picture of the moon, it has to have been photographed on September 23, 2015, based on moon phasing. Now, on that date, Mercury in stellarium is very dim, somewhat above the horizon. Also, I believe it's in a different location than the unknown object. All other planets are below the horizon. The video, therefore, conclusively and plainly shows an unidentified planet, or dwarf star, Planet X, of some significant magnitude quite clearly. So I can reach no other conclusion, and the analyst did himself, than this is a rare photo from this hemisphere of Planet X approaching us.
Wow. And there's also speculation now, and I hadn't heard this until about a year ago, that not only is Planet X going to come our way, this dwarf star, but also a bunch of planets with it, like it's bringing in its own solar system. Is there evidence or truth to that?
Right. There's a number of videos there. I've seen some real good ones from the South Pole Telescope, and they indicate that there are a variety of moons around this. It's basically, as you say, it's its own solar system. A lot of people don't realize this, but binary, what we've got in our solar system here is obviously a binary twin. 76%, this is a fact, of all stars are binary twins. In fact, 16% are trinary twins. There are 3 suns, but ours has a binary companion, and it comes under the name of Planet X, Nibiru, and so forth, Nemesis. There are various names to it. But ours has a binary twin, and it's very common. It's extremely common, and it's basically what is approaching us. And apparently, from all descriptions, indications, reports, insider reports, photographs, and other sources of human and signal intelligence, it contains 5 to 7 moons around it. So it's a solar system approaching our solar system, which makes it extremely dangerous. The red dragon of Revelation 12 may well be, and I believe rather obviously is, Planet X, as is referred to in an earlier chapter of Revelation, I think Revelation chapter 8, in a similar manner. A colleague of mine at the university, one university in the western U.S., brought up a very interesting point, perhaps to cover up to my attention. Here it is. Basically, he said the areas of the dragon anomaly have been covered or patched up by Google Sky in the past. But one of the ways to actually see what is behind this patched out area is to use a program called Skyview by NASA. Skyview, what that is, it's a virtual observatory on the net. It generates images of any part of the sky from wavelengths of all regimes, radio to gamma. You just filter it. Now, when you view these images in various filters, you can see the actual color of this anomaly in Virgo is red, and it does look very menacing, as it appears to have a face like a dragon with two profound eyes. It's very intriguing and quite strange. Now, just for your listeners, I'll provide very briefly the right ascension and declination if they want to go to Skyview. And here it is. Just cut and paste this coordinate. Here's the right ascension, 13 hours, 50 minutes, 44 seconds. Here's the declination, and that would be minus 8 hours, 13 minutes and 59.7 seconds. So right ascension is the celestial equivalent of longitude, and in the sky latitude is called declination. So you just enter those coordinates, and then on Skyview you just choose the Iris 100 micron telescope setting, and there you are. You've never seen an object quite like this one. Now, the sign itself might be a sweeping parenthetic of that entire biblical 70th week of Daniel, which is a key to solving the most complex cryptogram in existence, the book of the Apocalypse. As to what it is, the astronomical scientific community, I think, is keeping a very low profile. And the question is, why did they ever cover it up to begin with?
Well, and not only that, if we could get into some of the more scientific stuff as well.
Because it's so close now, it's different. When it was first observed, probably the first time it was actually observed, it was observed in the infrared spectrum in 1983 by a orbiting Earth satellite telescope called the Infrared Astronomical Satellite. And this is when all those articles appeared in the Washington Post and the New York Times and so forth. And that's when, right before blackout occurred, there were some articles over a 6 to 12 month period of time when it was pretty much spoken freely of. And then all of a sudden, I think they realized the seriousness of the matter, and they went ahead and produced a blackout. Now, remember this, the blue daytime sky is going to hide Planet X until it eclipses the sun. But there is going to be a full disk solar eclipse right after September 23rd, 2017. This occurs, if you look at moon charts, on October 5th, 2017. And what happens, of course, during a full disk solar eclipse is the sky turns black, and that will reveal at that point, that week, in my opinion, the week of October 5th to 12th, if the book of Revelation is true, because this ties in perfectly with it, that could well be the exact month that we can first see it with the naked eye. So, in my opinion, combined with a predictive computer-generated astronomical model, the Bible, the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, tells us that the red dragon, or Planet X, or Nibiru, appears after September 23rd, 17, but it has to appear before October 11th, 2017. At that date, October 11th, 2017, the sign in Virgo, the woman Virgo, will no longer be, quote, pregnant. Then the red dragon, or Planet X, therefore must make it an appearance before October 11th. So that seems to be a cutoff date. Jupiter, which is known as the planet or the star of the Messiah, exits Virgo, the Virgin, on October 11th after having spent, I believe, 301 days or about 42 weeks in the, quote, womb region of that constellation. And again, after that point, the woman will no longer be pregnant. So that gives us a very narrow window, just to use Book of Revelation or the Apocalypse as sort of an intel briefing. And the great sign of the woman, is described in Revelation 12, 1 to 2, forms and lasts for a few hours. And according, again, to astronomical models, this sign has never before occurred in human history. It will occur once on September 23rd, 27. It will never occur again. And I believe it places us right at the time frame from that analysis of the Planet X approach to the Earth. I would prepare on or before the fall of 2017. I would conduct emergency preparedness. Of course, you want to be spiritually ready. You want to have a clear conscience and all that, but you need to do physical preparations as well. I think survival gear, emergency food, that sort of thing. And the reason is that, again, all this while you're going to get increasing levels of disinformation from the mass media until it's actually there. And then they're going to say, whoops, we didn't have any notice, we don't know what happened, and so forth. And they're going to run and hide in what they've already established. But, you know, the public is there and the public has to fend for itself. This global warming, as you've heard, I'm sure, is a cover story. The Earth is heating up from the core outward because of the approach of Planet X. During the 20th century, I think there were 35 volcanic eruptions in a typical year. Now there are more than 35 of these every single day. So basically, when X approaches, that week you see it in the sky, let's say it's October of 2017, you know, for purposes of discussion, at that point, it's not going to actually collide, I don't believe, with the Earth. The Earth is only 8,000 miles in diameter. It may pass 5, 10, 15 million miles away, but it has a very high magnetic attraction. It's going to have a gravitronic effect. It's going to cause the shifting of the Earth's crust. It's going to cause major volcanic activity. It's going to cause tidal waves. And when a pole shift happens, the ocean literally comes up out of its basin. So you're going to have major weather changes, seismic activity, and volcanic eruptions. Probably at that point, Yellowstone, the Yellowstone super caldera, will likely erupt. That could affect up to a third of the United States, cover it with ash.
Well, let me jump in here for a second. I'm glad you brought that up because you can clearly tell a difference now with how hot the sun is. I mean, even if you look at the same temperature, you know, 75 degrees now versus 75 degrees 10 years ago, although it's the same temperature, the sun on your skin even, there's just more heat there.
If you go to the book of Revelation, the Revelation indicates that the sun is going to be hotter at that time frame. Now, the EMP effect, Planet X has a massive tail. It's fantastically charged. It's magnetic. The tail has moons and rocks in it. Now, this can down aircraft and satellite when it passes. It can affect the electrical grid. Now, of course, NASA, JPL, and the other disinformation sources ignore this data. But here are the facts. The Earth has a nickel and iron core. Now, this generates its magnetic field. However, the magnetosphere has large holes in it. The magnetosphere is a static shield. Now, under routine solar conditions, it protects the Earth from coronal mass ejections. But when Planet X arrives, we're no longer under routine solar conditions. Now, you know that the magnetic poles have been shifting towards Russia at maybe 40 miles an hour a year. But when Planet X arrives, the physical poles will shift.